One Question is designed to give subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences.
Hello, this is Matt Roberts with D1 Ticker for a new conversation of One Question. I'm joined today by Rick Alessandri. He is the new managing director and general manager of Turnkey, but did spend 20 years at ESPN as chief of staff and another handful at Univision as EVP. And Rick, what you guys are diving into in the space where you've played now for decades in your professional career, I think for leadership in college athletics, certainly at the conference level, but even at the department level and the institutional level, senior leaders have an eye on what's going on in the media space, whether we're talking about broadcast networks, cable networks, OTT players. It is, in many cases, if you're a Power 5, Power 6, high major brand, it is a huge piece of your revenue budget. Even if you're not a high major brand and you're a mid-major brand or a low major brand, that space very much is your vehicle to exposure to fans, recruits, potential fans, potential prospective student athletes, etc. I am so fascinated by the overall machinations of what's going on, but I want to ask you to start, if you can pinpoint one specific item or one area within this greater media landscape that, given your background, you find most fascinating and are curious to see where it goes over, let's say, the next decade.
I think it's the sports gambling issue. With the legislation that's been passed and the leagues, the professional leagues at least, embracing gambling, I think you're going to see a tremendous amount of new companies, new entrants into the space. You've already seen folks like FanDuel and DraftKings pivot from daily fantasy to gambling. You're seeing entrants like William Hill coming from the UK, a long-established player in the UK in terms of betting, enter the US market. And I think that's going to be, and as far as sponsorship opportunities go, these companies, these brands sponsoring on jersey patches or in arena signage and television advertising, I think it's going to be a really exciting time for that industry over the next 10 years.
You mentioned TV advertising, and of course, Anthony Krupe of Ad Age had a really good piece that maybe came out 2 days ago, earlier this week, where he pulled data and combined it with some Nielsen survey data. The initial data that I was mentioning was from the PwC annual sports industry kind of roadmap and where it's growing and going. Yep. And the number was, $480 million annually strictly in TV advertising from casinos, gambling operators, et cetera. But when you use the word sponsorship, give us a sense of scale, and maybe you have numbers that you can point to over in the UK and Europe of what these brands are paying the likes of, let's say, Chelsea Football Club to show up on the dasher boards, or maybe that's a deal they're doing with Sky or BT, et cetera. Give us a scale of what kind of money, how large are these pots of money for the casinos and betting operators?
Again, it's evolving, and I think you're going to start to see more and more of these brands want to attach themselves to major franchises in professional leagues. I think it's not unreasonable to see sponsorships in the tens of millions of dollars on clubs that have global brand awareness. As you look at, obviously soccer, football teams all around the globe, you're seeing some of those jersey deals go for in the hundreds of millions of dollars range over 10 years. And I think obviously you're going to see that with these gambling operations as more and more leagues find ways to embrace it, but yet protect the integrity of their sports.
Who would you point to, or what are some strategies you would advise on doing exactly that? How to protect the purity, the integrity of the competition with the monetization of a activity that, on the black market in the United States clearly is a multi-billion-dollar marketplace that is now coming into the sunshine and going to be legalized. Do you have some thoughts on how individual organizations or leagues should think about achieving integrity on that front?
Yeah, listen, I think there are some leagues, and I won't get into which ones I think do it extremely well and ones that I think have a ways to go. But one league I will point out, and a thought leader who has been kind of one of the first folks out there willing to stand up and talk about this, has been Adam Silver at the NBA. And Adam, I think, sees it as we've evolved, sports has evolved, the consumer has evolved, well, legislation has been passed. You need to adapt. And I think if these leagues want to continue to see increases on the player side, you're going to continue to see, I think, increases on the media front, although I'm not sure they'll continue to increase at the same proportion they've been over the last 2 decades. But I think the NBA has done a really good job of creating the opportunities, both at the NBA and WNBA side, as well as think about how their data and the real-time use of that data can help drive some great in-game content, which would then create more opportunities potentially for gambling. So I think the leagues are going to start taking harder looks at their data. And, one of the jobs that I've had in my career was running a company called Sports Ticker, 25 years ago. And Sports Ticker was really the first real-time sports news and information source out there. We actually served all the Las Vegas casinos and betting shops with real-time information because we were the source for when Vegas paid off on bets. And I think the leagues have all seen the fact that in-game data, whether it's shot data or accuracy percentage or strikes and ball, there's so much in-game data now in terms of the number of feels you can gather on each action that it will create opportunity. And I think that's exciting.
I'm glad you mentioned the data angle because I could use some education on this. I think those in college athletics who listen to this podcast could use some education on this. When we read about or hear that a league is going to do a data deal with Vegas at large or casino, walk us through the steps. How is that data being shared in real time? What are the softwares in between the two players commonly? How is that actually executed?
I've been detached for a while, but when we did it at Sports Ticker, and I know at ESPN who had deals with the leagues as well for data to drive things like the bottom line and other services, the leagues all produce their in-game content. So as you're sitting there watching an NBA game or an NHL game, it's now evolved to every action. I think you're going to start to see more devices potentially put on players, whether it's RFID devices put on players to track their motion. You're seeing it in some soccer leagues now. How many miles did a player run in today's game? All of that data is now being gathered in real time by tech companies working with their respective leagues. And as you gather this wealth of data, real time in-game data, I think the application and how you present it to the consumers where the leagues are going to have to start taking a look at, okay, what are the right data fields? How do you present it? What are the things that you can not control, but what are the things that are not subject to kind of open-ended questions?
When we think about like product market fit and timing in a couple of different contexts, but is there a connection in your mind between the ever increasing rate of data exchange with, let's say, 5G and fiber with actually executing in-game wagering that just wasn't possible, let's say, 10 years ago? So we're building off the timing of technology in many different facets here.
There's no question. I'm probably dating myself, but we literally, back in 1982 when I started at Sports Ticker, we literally had 600 reporters, what we used to call stringers, at every single ballpark, at every single D1, A, AA school, and we would gather information by literally having them pick up the phone, no cell phones, pick up the phone, dial our newsroom back in Scarsdale, New York, give us the update, Fordham 24, Iona 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and we would literally put that out over the Western Union teletype machine. Eventually, we migrated to computer systems, and then ultimately, at the major league level, we had our own software that we put at the stadiums, and I had reporters enter it directly there and then feed our systems. But technology continues to evolve. Data networks, mobile networks continue to evolve. We're consuming more we're creating more content than you could possibly imagine. Every individual one of us, from Instagram to Twitter to Facebook posts to, your GPS data, if you have it on if you have Google enabled and it's tracking every single step you're taking and recreating that map and pushing out alerts to you based upon when you pass a store, et cetera. All that data needs more bandwidth. So yes, you're seeing consolidation in that industry, the Sprint T-Mobile integration, consolidation, and it's all going to be focused on the next mobile network, which is 5G and other technologies down the road.
Earlier, you noted the rate of increase of media rights fees, and I think you said maybe we won't see as sharp of increases on that front as we have the last 2 decades, and unquestionably, college conferences up and down the ladder, but primarily at the top, have really benefited from some significant rights fee increases. And we don't have a big window on that front until the early 2020s when you have the Big Ten has some stuff out there, the Pac-12 certainly, SEC on CBS, and a couple of others. Between now and the early 20s, what are some key storylines you're watching as pertains to maybe where collegiate rights will go?
Well, I think the thing that everyone is kind of waiting for, and the questions are continually asked, and I think some of these companies tap dance around the answers or they dip their toe in the water. But when you look at some of the classify them as technology companies, social media companies, Facebook, Google, et cetera, you look at the wealth that they've accumulated and the war chest that they have. What are the deals that they want to go after to differentiate themselves in the marketplace? Most of these companies, Amazon is starting to look obviously much deeper at the sports landscape. They're all trying to figure out where do you place your bets? Do you want to get into a protracted rights negotiation, rights battle against the ESPNs and Foxes of the world who have different business models? Or do you want to pick off unique grassroots leagues and opportunities that can serve a community, can serve an audience, can serve an underserved community or audience? So I think that's going to be interesting to watch, is where these companies start to place their bets. You saw Facebook did some MLB content this year. Amazon's dipped their toe in the water with some tennis. So I think that's going to be really interesting, especially as it relates to college. And you said, as these deals come up with ESPN and Fox and Disney, et cetera.
Yeah, where do you fall on Brian Rolap, Chief Digital and Business Officer for the NFL, again says, show me one of these players who can handle 25 million concurrent viewers, and that's a big look. That's a huge number that maybe isn't being produced regularly in the collegiate space. But you noted Amazon's foray with U.S. Open, which had some technical difficulties for sure. Major League Baseball and Facebook also had some glitches. How far are we from the latency being basically nothing, and that being a chasm that is easily jumped in these negotiations?
Broadcast television has been around for quite some time. They've got it down. The billions and billions of dollars that have been invested, both from the technology side, from the HD side, everything from cameras to distribution networks, the investments that cable companies have made, clearly they've got this thing humming and working the right way. And I think Brian's spot on in terms of, the NFL still, people talk about the ratings up and down. The ratings are still significant.
Massive, yes.
When you look at it in context of everything else that happens out there. So, yes, I think there's some time. And that's why, again, I think these companies are dipping their toes in the water, testing things, getting the technology right, seeing, is there again, one of the things that I know ESPN did a bunch of years ago is look at properties like the international cricket, finding underserved communities who are passionate about their sports. My wife is a huge wrestling fan, subscribes to Flow for wrestling in particular, has been a subscriber to the Big Ten network on their mobile device because, we can't miss a Penn State match or game. So I think there are consumers out there, and quite frankly, college, to me, and I went to Fordham and we had some great programs, but not near the kind of excitement, enthusiasm, and fandom that I see, up at State College. And that kind of fandom every week, Michigan this past weekend, blew us out, but 111,000 fans who, if Michigan's on the road or if they're going to follow that team somehow, some way, they're going to follow them. So that passion, those flow sports opportunities out there and others like that, I think serve these communities well.
Is there a particular organization that you might point to? And the one that comes to mind for me is maybe what Steve Ballmer is doing with the LA Clippers and some of their rights. Is that an organization you would point to and go, man, they're really thinking about this ahead of the curve here? Or is there another that you would kind of put into the same bucket, others that you put in the same bucket?
I've read a lot about what the Clippers are doing. And obviously when you're owned by Mr. Ballmer, you're going to have technology at the forefront of your fan experience, as you would in Dallas with Mark Cuban. And as you start to see more and new ownership groups come in, they're going to create a better fan experience. And understanding, even as simple as I got to have access to Wi-Fi when I'm sitting in my seat. Sure. It boggles my mind when I go to an arena today and I can't get access. So yes, I think you're going to see, obviously, the technologists make that investment, but it's really at the forefront of it. And Ballmer's a product guy. It's about the product. It's about creating the best consumer experience, whether it's in game or on screen or at home. I think you're going to see that with, at least from what I've read, what Ebersol is building with his new football league. Mm-hmm. Technology will be a key driver to the league, and that's the way it needs to be looked at. I think that's a really smart approach.
One piece of the infrastructure play here that I don't think gets enough play within the media because it's way down in the weeds, but is the actual BAM techs of the world who are delivering the content, right? We see the front end a lot. We see ESPN Plus, or you see CBS's All Access app, but the understanding of the architecture and infrastructure that's actually delivering the content I find fascinating. And I'm curious if you have any views on maybe which players end up winning that space. The Zone's using a different one now. There's obviously a half dozen or so players out there, but it's a piece of the storyline that I'm not sure gets much.
I worked at ESPN for over 20 years. A lot of smart people there. Aaron LaBerge, who's leading the technology at ESPN and Disney on the direct-to-consumer piece. There's a lot of Kevin Mayer, Jimmy Pitaro. There are a lot of smart folks there. So the acquisition of BAM clearly indicates that owning the rails is critical. Not just owning the trains, but you got to own the rails too. And when you look at what Endeavor, formerly IMG, did with the acquisition of New Lion, kind of the same thing. So yes, I think it's critically important. I think it's not the sexiest part of ESPN Plus, but it is the absolute crucial part. It's got to work. It's got to deliver. It's got to be up 99.99999% of the time.
Let's talk about where you and Lynn are taking this piece of the business. If we talk again a year from now, what would you have liked to have accomplished?
I would like to hear Len say that we've established a media practice that has placed X number of executives throughout the industry, that we're recognized as one of the leading shops. We care about our clients, that we care about the folks we place. We try to match the right, create the right fit with the right individual. And quite frankly, I just hope to be, half as successful as he's been over the last 22 years building out, the preeminent sports search entity. There's nobody in this industry that does it the way Len Perna does and the folks at Turnkey. They've continually been a leader here. I've spent most of my career in sports, and everyone and anyone in sports knows Turnkey.
Given and again, you've been in this space for, let's call it 2-3 decades, but given the still freshness of the OTT space specifically, where will we likely see talent come from? Will there end up being let's just use ESPN as an example, right? Because there's so many folks we could point to and say, oh, they used to be the EVP at ESPN, now they're running Formula One or wherever it may be. Do you think there's pockets of talent and trees of talent we will see grow in specific companies in this space?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of talent that has been at the traditional broadcast and cable networks that will find their way to these new technology, new media companies for their experience, for their management experience, as well as for their overall sports experience. I think you'll see one of the things that I've always been engaged with throughout my career has been working to identify young and up and coming talent who have incredible potential, and cultivating that potential and identifying them is critically important, because if you can find somebody at the senior manager level who's kind of flying below the radar, and then find them for a particular client for a junior level job, you've basically created a win-win situation. You've endeared yourself to the client, you've endeared yourself to that individual. There's a trust factor that exists, and I think that is what I've seen over the last, from the outside as well as now from the inside over the last 8 days. That's the way Turnkey has been built, is by building those trusted relationships throughout the industry. It's hard to put a price tag on how valuable that is.
Right. Talk me through the skill set in that space right now. And if we looked at college athletics, this isn't a universal statement, of course, but many times fundraisers, or those who can generate revenue for a department, can accelerate their path through the industry and end up in an AD chair somewhere. Now, again, that's not a universal statement, but is the skill set for the OTT media space right now more about somebody who understands understands rights negotiations and can identify the right undervalued properties, or do I need to have a really damn good sense of the rails and the infrastructure behind it? What's the right mix that you'd be looking for in this day and age to accelerate somebody through a leadership team?
I think it's all those pieces, right? It's not one in particular. On the programming front, yes, you're going to need to understand. Well, first on the marketing front and the business front, you need to define what it is you're trying to achieve. Is there a particular audience you're going after? Is it broad? Is it narrow? What's your business plan look like? Can it survive on a narrow cast kind of platform? Then you need to, as you build out that marketing plan, you obviously need marketers who understand subscription and retention of those clients, and we're seeing a lot of that. You need someone to understand the data and the business analytics piece. You need the programming people to understand what the right content is, what you define who your audience is, and where you go get that content, how you negotiate for it. And then you need folks on the production side, depending upon how you're going to produce the content, what the experience is going to look like coming out of the device, whether it's mobile device, big screen device, or whatever. And then overall, you need somebody to kind of keep the trains running on time. A general manager who has the ability to build a team and empower that team to perform at their peak, and then create an environment that allows for that success. Startups are not easy, and you need to continually evolve and adapt, and sometimes you need to make changes on the fly, whether it's at the senior positions or kind of at that middle management positions. Do people evolve with you or not? And that's to me, that's the fun of management. That's the fun I've had in my career, building businesses from scratch, understanding new audiences. I went to Univision in 2011. I'm not Hispanic. I don't speak Spanish, but I took the time to understand the community, to understand the needs of the community, and then built a team. And then we went at it and built many successful businesses that continue to this day to serve and empower the U.S. Hispanic community. So, it's really about finding the right talent and letting them go, letting them do their job.
This episode of One Question is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.